The eviction notice had been taped to Lisa Morgan's apartment door for 3 days before she finally had the courage to peel it off. 30 days. That's all she had left before she and her 8-year-old daughter Emma would be on the street. Lisa stood in her cramped kitchen that Tuesday morning, the pink slip crumpled in her hand, watching Emma eat generic cereal from a chip bowl. The little girl hummed while she ate, completely unaware that their world was about to collapse. Lisa had done everything right, or at least she thought she had. Worked double shifts at Murphy's Diner, picked up weekend cleaning jobs, sold everything that wasn't nailed down. Her grandmother's jewelry, the decent furniture, even her wedding dress from a marriage that ended when Emma was 2. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. The rent kept climbing while her paycheck stayed the same. And now here she was, 32 years old, with $642 in her checking account and nowhere to go. Emma looked up, milk dripping from her chin. "Mom, are you okay?" Lisa forced a smile, tucking the eviction notice into her pocket. "Just thinking, baby. Finish up or you'll be late for school." After dropping Emma off, Lisa didn't go straight to work. Instead, she drove to the library and spent an hour scrolling through housing listings on the ancient computer. Everything was too expensive. Even the worst neighborhoods wanted first and last month's rent plus security. She tried homeless shelters, but the waiting lists were months long. She called her sister in Denver, but Maria had her own problems, 3 kids and a husband who'd been laid off from the factory. By the time Lisa made it to Murphy's Diner, she was 20 minutes late. Her manager, Carl, didn't even look up from the register. "That's the 3rd time this month, Lisa." She tucked her hair behind her ear, fighting back tears. "I know, I'm sorry. My car wouldn't start." Carl grunted, clearly not believing her. "Just get to work." The lunch rush was brutal. Lisa's feet ached in her worn sneakers, and her back screamed every time she bent to wipe a table. But she smiled. She always smiled, because rent money came from tips, and tips came from making people believe you were happy to serve them eggs over easy at 11 in the morning. It was during the afternoon lull that everything changed. Lisa was refilling salt shakers when old Henry Parker shuffled in. Henry was a regular 91 years old, sharp as a tack, and full of stories nobody had time to hear. He always sat at the corner booth, always ordered black coffee and wheat toast, and always left exactly $3 no matter what the bill came to. Lisa poured his coffee without being asked. He studied her with eyes that had seen the Great Depression, World War II, and everything since. "You look tired, girl." She turned to go, but Henry caught her wrist gently. "Sit a minute. Carl's in the back and there's nobody else here." Lisa hesitated, then slid into the booth across from him. Henry sipped his coffee, watching her over the rim. "How bad is it?" She looked away, blinking hard. "We're getting evicted. I've got 30 days to find somewhere else." She shrugged, trying to seem casual. "Everything's too expensive. I can't save up enough for deposits when I'm barely making rent as it is." Henry reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of newspaper. "Found this in the class section. Been carrying it around for a week, trying to decide if I should show it to someone." He slid the paper across the table. Lisa unfolded it. The ad was small, just a few lines. "For sale. Vintage railway car located on private property outside Cedar Falls. Needs work. 500 OBO. Serious inquiries only." There was a phone number at the bottom. A train car. Lisa almost laughed. "Henry, I need a place to live, not a museum piece." Henry's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Think about it. 500. That's it. No monthly rent. No landlord. Sure, it needs work, but you're handy. I've seen you fix that coffee machine a dozen times when Carl was too cheap to call a repairman." "But where would I even put it?" Henry tapped the ad with a gnarled finger. "Ad says it's on private property. Maybe you could work out a deal to keep it there. Trade work for land use or something. Point is, it's a roof over your head for $500. When's the last time you saw that?" Lisa stared at the ad. It was crazy, completely insane. But what other choice did she have? She had saved almost $650 for next month's rent money. That wouldn't matter once they were evicted anyway. "Keep it," Henry said, standing up. He left his usual 3D on the table. Sometimes the best decisions are the ones that don't make sense on paper. That night, after Emma was asleep, Lisa called the number. A woman answered on the 5th ring, voice creaky with age. "Eleanor Wilson." Lisa introduced herself, her voice uncertain. "Yes, I'm calling about the train car, the one in the classified ad." There was a long pause on the other end. "Still interested, are you? Most folks think it's a joke. I'd like to see it." Tomorrow to Haru. I'll give you the address. Lisa wrote down the directions on the back of an envelope. The property was 40 minutes outside of town, past the old lumber mill down a dirt road she'd never heard of. The next day, she told Carl she had a doctor's appointment and left after the lunch rush. The drive took her through parts of the county she'd never seen. Rolling hills dotted with abandoned barns, fields, returning to forest, the skeleton of rural America slowly being reclaimed by nature. The dirt road was exactly where Eleanor said it would be, marked by a rusted mailbox with no name, just the number 47, painted in fading white. The road wound through thick woods for nearly a mile before opening into a clearing. Lisa's beat-up Honda struggled over the ruts and stones, but finally she saw it. A small farmhouse with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Beside it sat a barn that had seen better days. And beyond that, on a section of track that seemed to go nowhere, sat the train car. Even from a distance, Lisa could see it was old. Not ancient, but old enough to have stories. The paint was faded and chipped, showing patches of rust like freckles. Weeds grew up around the wheels, but there was something about it, something solid and permanent, that made her heart beat faster. A woman emerged from the house, small, bent, probably in her 80s. She wore a house dress that might have been fashionable in 1960 and walked with a cane that seemed more like a prop than a necessity. "You the one who called?" "Yes, ma'am. Lisa Morgan." Eleanor didn't offer to shake hands. "Well, come on then. Let's get this over with." They walked across the overgrown yard, grasshoppers jumping away from their feet. Up close, the train car was bigger than Lisa had expected. It wasn't a full passenger car, more like what they used to call a crew car, maybe 40 feet long, with windows along both sides and a door at each end. "Belonged to my husband," Eleanor said. Edwin collected all sorts of nonsense. Said he was going to restore it, turn it into a guest house or some fool thing. That was 25 years ago. He's been dead for 10. "I'm sorry for your loss," Eleanor waved dismissively. "Long time ago. Anyway, I'm selling the property, moving to Florida to live with my daughter. Everything's got to go." She produced a key ring with dozens of keys, fumbled through them, and finally found the right one. The door protested as it opened hinges, screaming like they hadn't moved in years. The smell hit Lisa first, musty like old books and forgotten spaces. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light coming through grimy windows. The interior was a time capsule. Bench seats lined both walls, their leather cracked but intact. The floor was solid wood, scarred but sound. At one end was what looked like a small kitchen area, a sink, some cabinets even, what might be a tiny stove. "Edwin did some work on it," Eleanor said from the doorway. She didn't come inside. "Put in the kitchen stuff. There's a bathroom too, though I can't say what shape it's in." Lisa walked slowly through the space, running her hand along the seats, testing the floor with her weight. It was dirty, yes. Neglected, absolutely. But underneath the grime, she could see potential. More than that, she could see a home. The electricity. "There's a hookup," Edwin ran a line from the barn. "Water too, though you'd need to check the pipes. And you want 500. That's what I advertised. Though I suppose if you had 450, I wouldn't turn it down." Like I said, everything's got to go. Lisa reached the far end of the car where another door led to what must be the bathroom. She tried the handle, but it didn't budge. "Is this locked?" Eleanor frowned. "Shouldn't be. Edwin never locked anything. Probably just stuck." Lisa tried again, putting her shoulder into it. The door remained firmly shut. She noticed something else too. While the rest of the car showed 25 years of neglect, the area around this door looked different, cleaner somehow, like someone had been more careful here. "What's behind this doored bathroom?" Like I said, maybe a storage area. Edwin had all sorts of plans. Eleanor sounded impatient now. "Look, do you want it or not? I've got other things to do." Lisa took one more look around. It was crazy, absolutely insane. But Henry had been right. It was a roof for $500. She could figure out the rest later. "I'll take it." Eleanor's eyebrows shot up. "Just like that? Just like that? Can I bring you cash tomorrow?" "Cash is good. But what exactly are you planning to do with an old train car?" Lisa met her eyes steadily. "Live in it." For the first time, Eleanor's expression softened. "Times are tough, aren't they?" She glanced back at the car. Well, it served its purpose, sitting here empty all these years. Maybe it's time it was useful again. They shook hands, Eleanor's grip surprisingly firm. "One thing," the old woman said. "The land. I'm selling to a developer, but the deal won't close for at least 6 months. You can keep the car here until then. After that, you'll need to move it or work something out with the new owners. 6 months. It wasn't forever, but it was longer than the 30 days she had now. Lisa nodded, thank you. As Lisa drove away, she caught a glimpse of the train car in her rearview mirror, sitting on its forgotten tracks like a ship run aground. She had no idea how she was going to make it livable. No idea how she'd explain to Emma that their new home was a rusted piece of railway history. No idea about a lot of things, but for the first time in months, she felt something other than despair. Hope, maybe. Or just the relief that came from making a decision. Any decision, even a crazy one. That night, she sat Emma down after dinner. Baby, how do you feel about an adventure? Emma's eyes lit up. What kind of adventure? The kind where we live somewhere really different. Somewhere special. Like where Lisa pulled out her phone and showed her a picture she'd taken. Like here. Emma studied the photo, her little forehead wrinkling. Is that a train? It's a train car, and it's going to be our new home. She waited for tears, for protests, for the entirely reasonable reaction any 8-year-old should have to being told they're moving into an abandoned train car. Instead, Emma's face broke into a huge grin. Like the boxcar children, for real. For real. Emma bounced in her seat. Can I tell Sophia? She's never going to believe this. Later, after Emma had finally fallen asleep, she'd been too excited to settle down. Lisa sat at their small table with a notebook making lists. Things they'd need, things she could sell to get them, things she'd have to figure out how to fix. The list grew longer and longer, but somehow it didn't feel overwhelming. It felt like a plan. The next morning, she withdrew $500 from her savings. It hurt to see the balance drop so low, but she reminded herself that this money would have gone to a landlord who was kicking them out anyway. At least this way they'd have something. She met Eleanor at the property at noon. The old woman counted the bills twice, then handed over a single key and a handwritten receipt. The big key is for the main doors, Eleanor said. Don't know what the others are for. Edwin had keys to everything. She paused at her car door. You know, my grandmother lived in a converted railway car during the Depression. Said it was the hardest and best time of her life. Maybe that's why Edwin wanted this one. History repeating itself. After Eleanor left, Lisa stood alone with her new home. In daylight, it looked even more daunting. The rust was deeper than she'd noticed, and several windows were cracked. But the bones were good. That's what her father would have said. The bones were good. She climbed inside and spent an hour really exploring. The kitchen area would need everything replaced, but the cabinets were solid wood underneath the grime. The main space was bigger than their current apartment. The benches could be turned into beds with some creativity. There was even a small coal stove at one end that might still work. But that locked door bothered her. She tried the handle again, then examined the frame. Unlike the rest of the car, which showed its age, honestly, this door looked like it had been reinforced. The lock was newer too, maybe added in the last decade. Lisa found a crowbar in her trunk, one of the few useful things her ex-husband had left behind, and considered her options. This was her property now. She had every right to open any door she wanted. But something made her discern the careful way someone had secured this space, the intentional preservation. She compromised by examining the door more carefully, running her fingers along the frame. She found something interesting, scratches in the wood that looked deliberate, letters maybe, or numbers worn smooth by time. At the bottom of the door, almost hidden by dirt, was a small metal plate. She knelt and rubbed it clean. Northern Pacific Railway, 1934 crew quarters. 1934. The train car was 90 years old. How many miles had it traveled? How many stories had played out in this space? A sound made her jump, footsteps on gravel. She turned to find a man approaching, probably in his 60s, wearing coveralls and a John Deere cap. You the new owner? Lisa stood brushing dirt off her knees. Yes, Lisa Morgan. Frank Morrison. I live next door. He gestured vaguely east. Saw Eleanor leaving. Figured she finally found someone crazy enough to buy Edwin's project. You knew Edwin. Everyone knew Edwin. Good man, bit of a dreamer. Frank walked around the car appraising it. He had big plans for this thing. Showed me drawings once. Full restoration, modern amenities, the works. Even had some historical society people out here a few years back. Historical society. Yeah, apparently this particular car has some significance. Edwin never said what exactly. He could be secretive about his projects. Frank's eyes went to the locked door. Never did get that section open, did he? Lisa's pulse quickened. He tried, oh yeah, last few years before he died, he was obsessed with it. Said the previous owner had sealed it up for a reason, and he wanted to respect that. But curiosity ate at him. I helped him try to pick the lock once, but Edwin backed off, said it didn't feel right. The previous owner. Who was that? Frank shrugged. Before Edwin's time. He bought it from an estate sale in the 80s. The railway sold off a bunch of old cars, and this one had been sitting in a yard in Minneapolis for decades. He walked to the door and examined it like he'd done so many times before. You know what's funny? Edwin replaced everything else in here, windows, some flooring, added the kitchen, but he never touched this door. Said it was part of the car's story. After Frank left with an offer to help if she needed anything, Lisa stood before the door again. Part of the car's story. What story? And why did someone go to such lengths to seal it away? She decided to leave it for now. There was too much else to do. But as she spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning and planning, her eyes kept drifting back to that door. Whatever was behind it had been locked away for a reason. The question was whether that reason still mattered. That evening, she brought Emma to see their new home. Her daughter's reaction was everything she'd hoped for, pure, uncomplicated joy. It's huge. Emma ran from one end to the other, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. Can I have this whole bench for my bed? Can we hang curtains? Can we paint it? We can do whatever we want. It's ours. Emma stopped at the locked door. What's in here? I don't know yet. It's locked, like a mystery. Emma's eyes widened. Maybe it's treasure. Maybe it's just a boring old bathroom. Mom, nothing about this is boring. Emma spun in a circle, arms outstretched. We live in a train. A real train. The next 3 weeks were a blur of work planning and transformation. Lisa and Emma spent every free moment at the train car. Frank Morrison proved to be a godsend, helping them connect the water line and check the electrical hookup. He taught Lisa basic carpentry, showing her how to replace rotted boards and seal windows against the coming winter. Emma threw herself into the project with the enthusiasm only an 8-year-old could maintain. She scrubbed benches, arranged her small collection of dolls on a shelf Frank had built, and told everyone at school that she lived in a real, actual train. Her teacher called Lisa concerned until Lisa explained their situation. Money was tighter than ever. Carl had cut Lisa's hours at the diner after she'd asked for a more flexible schedule. The irony wasn't lost on her. She needed the job to afford improving the train car, but needed time to make the train car livable. She sold her TV, her microwave, even her bed frame, sleeping on a mattress on the floor of their apartment until they could officially move. The locked door remained untouched. Lisa had told herself she was too busy, and that was partly true. Every moment not spent at the diner was dedicated to making their new home livable. But there was something else too, a strange reluctance, as if opening that door would change everything. It was on a rainy Thursday afternoon when Lisa first met James Prescott, the real estate developer buying Eleanor's property. He pulled up in a gleaming black SUV wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than Lisa made in a month. He stood in the rain looking at the train car with unconcealed disdain. So you're the one Eleanor mentioned. The squatter. Lisa bristled at the word. I'm not squatting. I bought this train car legally and I have an agreement to keep it here until the sale closes. Prescott smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Of course. My mistake. But you do understand this property is slated for development, luxury vacation homes. He gestured to the surrounding hills. People pay a premium for this view. A rusty train car doesn't exactly enhance the aesthetic. I have 6 months to figure something out, according to my agreement with Mrs. Wilson. Prescott checked his watch, already losing interest. 6 months then. Though between you and me, I can't imagine you'll last more than one in this tetanus trap. He turned to go, then paused. Just out of curiosity, what are you planning to do with it when you have to move it? These tracks don't connect to anything. Lisa didn't have an answer, and Prescott knew it. He nodded as if she'd confirmed something. That's what I thought. Well, good luck with your project. Lisa watched him drive away, anger burning in her chest. Who was he to judge her choices, to look down on her from his position of privilege and wealth? She channeled that anger into work, scrubbing the kitchen cabinets until her knuckles bled, then sanding the floor until blisters formed on her palms. Frank found her there at sunset, still working despite the fading light. You're gonna kill yourself at this rate. Lisa wiped sweat from her forehead, leaving a smear of dust. I met the developer today. Ah, James Prescott. Frank's tone conveyed everything he thought about the man. He suggested I wouldn't last a month here. Frank chuckled. Well, then looks like we better prove him wrong. With Frank's help, Lisa installed a small, tankless water heater, patched the roof, and reinforced the floor in weak spots. The coal stove turned out to be functional, and with a good cleaning and a new chimney pipe, it would keep them warm through the winter. The bathroom behind the regular door, not the mysterious locked one, was basic but workable. A toilet, a tiny shower, a sink. All needed refurbishing, but none needed replacing. By the end of the third week, the transformation was remarkable. The windows gleamed. The wooden floor, though still scarred, shone with new varnish. The benches had been reupholstered with fabric from a thrift store. Curtains hung at the windows, and battery-powered lamps gave the space a warm glow. It was still clearly a train car, but now it was also clearly a home. Lisa's bank account was empty. She'd spent the last of her savings on insulation and a small refrigerator, but they were ready to move in just in time as their apartment lease ended in 3 days. The plan was to sleep in the train car for the first time on Friday night, with the official move on Saturday. But on Thursday night, everything changed. Emma was at a sleepover with her friend Sophia, giving Lisa one last evening to finish things up. Rain drummed against the metal roof as she worked, checking for leaks, adjusting curtains, arranging their meager belongings in the space. The storm intensified as night fell, wind howling around the train car, making it creak and groan like a living thing. Lisa found herself standing before the locked door, again drawn there, as if by some invisible force. 3 weeks she'd waited, 3 weeks of wondering what lay beyond. She ran her fingers along the doorframe again, feeling those strange scratches. In the dim light of her battery lamp, they almost seemed to form words. She knelt down to examine the metal plate she'd cleaned earlier, tracing the letters with her finger. Northern Pacific Railway, 1934 crew quarters. A particularly strong gust of wind rocked the train car, and water began to drip through a spot in the ceiling she thought she'd sealed. Lisa grabbed a bucket from the kitchen area and positioned it under the leak. As she did, she noticed something odd about the floor nearby, a section near the locked door that had a slightly different pattern than the rest. She knelt down, running her fingers across the boards. They were newer, probably replaced when the door was sealed. Working on instinct, she grabbed a flathead screwdriver and carefully worked it between two boards. The wood was solid, but not nailed as securely as the original flooring. After several minutes of gentle prying, one board popped free, revealing a small cavity beneath. Lisa's heart pounded as she aimed her flashlight into the space. There, wrapped in what looked like oilcloth, was a small bundle. She reached in, half expecting spiders or worse, but her fingers found only the package. The oilcloth was brittle with age, but had done its job. Inside was a leather journal, its cover worn smooth, and beneath it a brass key. Lisa held the key up to the light. It was smaller than a modern key, with intricate teeth and a decorative handle. Without hesitation, she stood and inserted it into the lock on the mysterious door. It turned with surprising ease, as if it had been waiting. The door opened to darkness and the scent of time itself. Lisa stepped through into what should have been a simple bathroom or storage area. Instead, she found herself in a perfectly preserved time capsule. The space was larger than she'd expected, taking up nearly a quarter of the train car. Wooden shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes and bundles. A small desk sat against one wall, with paper still spread across its surface, as if someone had just stepped away. She moved her flashlight slowly across the room, afraid to disturb anything. On the desk was a fountain pen, its ink long dried, a pair of wire-rimmed glasses, a coffee cup with a residue of ancient grounds, and photographs. Dozens of them, some framed, others loose, all in black and white. Lisa picked up the nearest photo with trembling hands. It showed a young man in a railway uniform standing beside the very train car she now called home, but when it was new, its paint fresh and bright. He was smiling, one hand resting proudly on the car's side. On the back, in careful script, Nathan Anderson, head porter, Northern Pacific Railway, 1941. She set the photo down gently and examined the shelves. The boxes were labeled in the same careful handwriting: personal effects, railway documents, the truth about Preston. That last one made her pause. She pulled it down, noting how carefully it had been sealed with wax. Inside were newspaper clippings, yellowed and fragile. The headlines made her sink into the desk chair. 'Railway heir missing. Senator's son vanishes without trace.' 'Railway heir missing.' Senator's son vanishes without trace. 'Railway heir missing.' Senator's son vanishes without trace. 'Railway heir missing.' Senator's son vanishes without trace. 'Railway heir missing.' Family offers reward for information on Alexander Preston. Alexander Preston. Lisa spread the clippings across the desk, piecing together a story from 8 decades past. Alexander had been 23 sole heir to a railway fortune. When he disappeared in the spring of 1942, his family owned significant shares in Northern Pacific Railway. He'd been traveling from Chicago to Seattle when he vanished somewhere in Montana. His private car was found empty, his belongings undisturbed. But Alexander was gone. The official story, according to the newspapers, was that he'd fallen from the train, his body lost in the wilderness. But there were whispers of other theories: gambling debts, a forbidden romance, even murder. The family spent a fortune searching for him, but Alexander Preston was never found. Lisa turned back to the leather journal she'd found under the floorboards. The first entry was dated March 15, 1942. My name is Nathan Anderson, and I am writing this account because someone should know the truth. I have served the Northern Pacific Railway faithfully for 15 years. But what I have done, what I have agreed to do, weighs on my soul. Lisa pulled the desk lamp closer, praying the old wiring would hold, and began to read. Nathan's story unfolded in careful paragraphs, his penmanship never wavering, even as his tale grew more incredible. He'd been assigned as head porter on the route from Chicago to Seattle, a prestigious position he'd worked years to achieve. On the night of March 10th, his crew car had been attached to a special, private car carrying Alexander Preston. The young man was not what I expected, Nathan wrote. The newspapers paint him as a playboy, a wastrel living off his family's fortune. But the Alexander Preston I met was different. Troubled, yes haunted by something he couldn't name. He spent hours talking to me, the porter, the invisible man who served his meals and made his bed. He said I was the only person in months who looked him in the eye without seeing dollar signs. Over the course of the journey, Alexander had confided in Nathan. The fortune everyone envied was a prison. His father controlled every aspect of his life, had already chosen his bride, his career, even which clubs he would join. But worse than the control were the secrets. Alexander had discovered his father's involvement in something dark, something that went beyond simple business corruption. He showed me documents, Nathan wrote, contracts for transporting things that should never have been in those railway cars, lists of names, people who had disappeared when they asked too many questions, financial records that traced back to senators and judges. Alexander had spent months gathering evidence, planning to expose it all. But his father found out. The journal entries grew more urgent. Alexander knew his life was in danger. His father couldn't kill him outright. Too many questions would be asked. But an accident on a remote stretch of track, a young man known for drinking falling from a train in the dark, that would surprise no one. He begged me to help him. This young man with everything begging a porter for help. How could I refuse? We made a plan. Lisa's hands shook as she turned the page. On the night of March 12th, as the train passed through the remote mountains of Montana, Nathan had helped Alexander fake his death. They threw his coat from the train, left the private car's door open, scattered some of his belongings near the edge. Then Nathan had hidden Alexander in the one place no one would look, the locked storage compartment of the crew car. For 3 days, I smuggled him food and water. When we reached Seattle, I was supposed to help him disappear into the city. He had money hidden away, plans to start fresh under a new name. But something went wrong. The next entries were dated weeks later. Alexander had made it off the train, but he'd been spotted by another railway employee. There had been a confrontation. Alexander had been forced to run, leaving behind everything, including the evidence he'd gathered against his father. He came back, Nathan wrote. 3 weeks later, in the dead of night, he found me. Thin, desperate but alive. He gave me everything, the documents, the evidence, even items from his childhood that he couldn't bear to lose. He made me promise to keep them safe. Someday, he said, when my father is gone, when it's safe, make sure the truth comes out. Lisa looked up from the journal to the shelves of boxes. All of this, Alexander Preston's legacy, his proof, his personal treasures, had been sitting here for 8 decades, protected by a porter's promise. She opened the box labeled Personal Effects with reverent care. Inside were items that painted a picture of the man Alexander had been. A pocket watch inscribed, "To my beloved son on his 21st birthday." A photograph of a young woman with "My darling Elizabeth" written on the back. Letters tied with ribbon. A small leather box that Lisa opened to find a ring, not the ostentatious piece she'd expect from a railway heir, but a simple band with a modest diamond. He was going to propose, she whispered to the empty room. He was running towards something, not just away. The financial documents were in another box, and even with her limited understanding, Lisa could see why they were dangerous. Ledgers showing payments to judges, contracts for transporting illegal goods using railway cars marked as carrying grain, lists of competitors who had suffered accidents after refusing to sell their routes. But it was the last box that made Lisa's blood run cold. Photographs of Alexander's father with men she recognized from history books, powerful figures from the 1940s whose influence had shaped America. Documents suggesting the railway fortune was built not just on transportation, but on knowing which people and goods to move without questions. And at the bottom, wrapped in silk, a small key with a poem, First National Bank of Seattle, Box 447. Lisa sat back overwhelmed. This wasn't just history. This was evidence of crimes that had shaped fortunes still in existence today. The Preston family was still prominent in Seattle, still wealthy beyond measure. Alexander's father was long dead, but his descendants sat on boards funded. Politicians owned newspapers. She returned to Nathan's journal, needing to know how the story ended. I kept my promise. I sealed everything away. Told Edwin, the man I sold this car to years later, that this compartment must never be opened by anyone but the right person. I'm old now, and Alexander never came back. I checked the newspapers sometimes. The Preston fortune grew and grew. His father died peacefully in his bed in 1968, never paying for his crimes. But I keep hoping maybe Alexander is out there somewhere old like me, waiting for the right moment. Or maybe someone else will find this and have the courage I lacked. The final entry was dated December 1st, 1985. I am dying, cancer. The doctors say months at most. I have no family, no one to pass this burden to, so I leave it here in the place where it all began. I've added my own key to Alexander's box. The key to this room is now hidden beneath the floorboards. Only someone who needs this space, someone desperate enough to really look, will find it. Maybe that's how it should be, the desperate helping the desperate. Across the years, Lisa wiped tears from her eyes. Nathan Anderson had kept his promise for over 40 years, and now somehow that promise had passed to her. She spent hours going through everything, taking photos with her phone, being careful not to damage the fragile documents. In one box, she found more recent additions, newspaper clippings Nathan had added over the years, tracking the Preston family's rise. Alexander was mentioned occasionally, always as the tragic son who fell from a train, a cautionary tale about the dangers of drink and privilege. But in 1987, 2 years after Nathan's death, there was an interesting article. An elderly man in California had died and left a strange bequest, a scholarship fund for railway workers' children funded by a fortune no one knew he had. The man's name was Alexander Jensen, and he'd lived quietly as a carpenter for 45 years. The article showed a photo of the benefactor, and even aged and weathered Lisa could see the resemblance to the young man standing beside the train car. "You made it," she whispered. "You built a new life." It was nearly dawn when Lisa finally emerged from the sealed room. The rain had stopped and the first birds were beginning to sing. She stood in the main part of the train car, looking around with new eyes. This wasn't just an abandoned piece of railway history. It was a sanctuary, a place where truth had been preserved against all odds. Her phone buzzed, Emma texting that her friend's mom was making pancakes and could she stay for breakfast. Lisa smiled and texted back, yes, grateful for the time to process what she discovered. She made herself coffee and sat watching the sunrise through windows Nathan Anderson had looked through 80 years ago. The moral weight of what she'd found pressed down on her. The Preston family's crimes were old, the original perpetrators long dead. But their fortune built on those crimes still influenced the world. And somewhere in a bank in Seattle sat a safety deposit box that might contain even more evidence. Lisa thought about her own desperation, how it had led her to buy this train car for $500. She thought about Nathan keeping a dangerous secret out of loyalty to a young man who treated him with respect. She thought about Alexander choosing truth over fortune, love over family, freedom over comfort. The locked door stood open now, spilling its secrets into the dawn light. Lisa knew she could seal it back up, pretend she'd never found the key. She could focus on her own survival, on making a home for Emma, on keeping her head down and her problems small. But as she watched the sun rise over the hills, painting the old train car in gold and shadow, she knew that wasn't what she was going to do. Some truth demanded to be told, even if the telling came decades late. Some promises transcended the people who made them. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number for the journalist who'd written a series on corporate corruption for the Seattle Chronicle. Sarah Martinez had eaten at the diner a few times, always kind, always generous with their tips. They talked about kids and rent and the price of groceries, the casual conversation of two women trying to make it in an expensive world. Lisa hesitated, then typed out a text. "Hi, Sarah, this is Lisa from Murphy's Diner. I know this sounds crazy, but I've found something you need to see. It's about the Preston family. Can we meet?" The response came quickly, despite the early hour. "Intrigued. Can you come to Seattle tomorrow?" "I'll make it work," Lisa typed back. Outside, the train car sat in the growing light, its rusted exterior hiding decades of secrets finally ready to be revealed. Inside, Lisa Morgan stood at a crossroads, one path leading to simple survival, the other to something far more complex and dangerous. But as her father used to say, sometimes the right path isn't the easy one. And sometimes when you're already desperate, you've got nothing left to lose. Lisa spent the night poring over Nathan Anderson's journal, absorbing every detail of Alexander Preston's story. The young heir had discovered his father's network of corruption, bribes to judges, payoffs to politicians, and most disturbing of all, the use of Northern Pacific Railway cars to transport illegal goods across state lines. Howard Preston, Alexander's father, hadn't just built a fortune on transportation. He'd created an empire on blackmail, bootlegging, and buried secrets. Dawn found Lisa still at the small desk, surrounded by faded photographs and brittle newspaper clippings. She'd separated the documents into piles: financial records, personal effects, newspaper articles, trying to make sense of the decades-old conspiracy. The Preston family was still a power in Seattle, their charitable foundation funding everything from hospitals to university buildings. What would happen if the truth came out about how that fortune began? Lisa's phone vibrated with a text from Emma's friend's mother. "Emma's having a great time. Okay if she stays until lunch." Lisa replied quickly, grateful for more time to process her discovery. The Preston documents would have to wait. First, she needed to prepare the train car for their official move-in tomorrow. The eviction deadline from their apartment loomed just days away. She worked through the morning in a daze, installing curtain rods and arranging their sparse furniture, while her mind remained in 1942, traveling alongside Nathan and Alexander. Around noon, Frank Morrison appeared with his toolbox and a casserole from his wife. "Thought you might need this. Betty makes enough to feed an army." Lisa accepted the dish, momentarily overwhelmed by the kindness of near strangers. "You and Betty have been so good to us." Frank waved away her gratitude. "That's what neighbors do. Besides, I'm enjoying seeing this old car come back to life." His eyes drifted to the formerly locked door, now standing slightly ajar. "So you got it open?" Lisa hesitated only a moment before deciding to trust him. She led Frank into the hidden room, watching his expression shift from curiosity to astonishment as he took in the preserved time capsule. Been wondering what Edwin was so protective of all these years. He picked up one of the photographs, studying the young man in the railway uniform. Who was he, Nathan Anderson? He was a porter for Northern Pacific in the 40s, and apparently a keeper of dangerous secrets. Lisa explained what she'd discovered: Alexander Preston's disappearance, the evidence of corruption, the decades-long cover-up. Frank listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing more serious with each revelation. When she finished, he let out a low whistle. "The Prestons. They're still big shots in Seattle. I read about their new tech center downtown just last month." Lisa nodded, spreading out newspaper clippings that tracked the family's rise. 3 generations of wealth and influence built on a foundation of crime that was never exposed. Frank picked up a document detailing payments to a state judge in 1941. "This is dynamite, you know that, right? The statute of limitations has long passed on these crimes, but the reputation damage." He shook his head. "The Prestons won't take this lying down. They've got resources, connections." Lisa's stomach tightened at the implicit warning. "That's why I've contacted Sarah Martinez at the Seattle Chronicle. She's an investigative reporter and specializes in corporate corruption." Frank replaced the document carefully. "Just watch your back. Powerful people don't like their secrets aired." He glanced around the room once more. Edwin always said this car had stories to tell. Guess he was right. After Frank left, Lisa photographed every document with her phone, creating a digital backup. If anything happened to the original, she'd have copies. The thought sent a chill through her. Was she being paranoid or just prudent? The Preston family had buried their secrets for 80 years. What would they do to keep them buried now? Emma returned mid-afternoon, bursting with stories from her sleepover and eager to see the progress on their train home. Lisa showed her the improvements, the curtains, the small refrigerator, the shelves Frank had installed, but kept the secret room closed. At 8 years old, Emma didn't need to know about decades-old corruption or the moral weight her mother now carried. For her, the train car would remain an adventure, not a repository of dangerous truths. That night in their apartment, for the last time, Lisa lay awake on their mattress on the floor, listening to Emma's steady breathing beside her. Tomorrow they would move into the train car officially. Tomorrow she would also begin the journey of bringing the Preston secrets to light. The two paths seemed incompatible, one domestic and hopeful, the other potentially dangerous. Yet somehow both had found her at exactly the same moment of desperation. The next day dawned bright and clear, perfect moving weather. Lisa and Emma packed their remaining belongings, clothes, books, Emma's treasured stuffed animals, the few kitchen items Lisa hadn't sold. Everything fit in Lisa's Honda in a single trip, a stark reminder of how little they actually owned. Arriving at the train car, they found Frank and Betty waiting to help. The four of them made quick work of carrying boxes inside and arranging the space. By noon, the transformation was complete. The rusty exterior remained unchanged, but inside the train car had become a cozy if unconventional home. Emma claimed the bench seat at the far end, which Frank had modified to become a bed with storage underneath. Lisa would sleep on a pull-out sofa they'd found at a thrift store. The kitchen area now had a hot plate, the small refrigerator, and open shelving for their dishes and food. That afternoon, Emma explored every inch of their new space, her excitement undiminished by the smallness or the strangeness of it. For a child who had never had a room of her own, even a converted train car felt like a palace. But every time she approached the formerly locked door, Lisa redirected her attention elsewhere. That part of the car would remain off-limits for now. When Emma finally fell asleep that night, exhausted from the move, Lisa slipped into the secret room and returned to Nathan's journal. The entries after Alexander's escape painted a picture of a man living with both pride and fear. Nathan had protected Alexander at great personal risk. If the Preston family had discovered his role in the heir's disappearance, his life would have been forfeit. But there was more to Nathan's story than just Alexander. Tucked between journal entries were references to Nathan's military service, something he'd apparently kept separate from his railway identity. In one passage dated 1946, he wrote, "The skills I learned in France served me well when helping Alexander escape. Creating false documents, establishing new identities, planning routes that avoid detection. These were not talents a porter should have, but they were precisely what the OSS taught us to do behind enemy lines." Intrigued, Lisa searched the room for more information about Nathan's wartime activities. In a previously overlooked corner, she found a loose floorboard, similar to the one that had hidden the key. Prying it up carefully, she discovered a metal ammunition box with Lieutenant N. Anderson SOE stenciled on the side. Inside lay evidence of another life entirely, a set of dog tags for Lieutenant Nathan Anderson, a Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, a Combat Infantryman badge, and beneath these honors, a leather portfolio marked classified in faded red letters. The first document was a certificate of appreciation from the Office of Strategic Services, the precursor to the CIA, thanking Lieutenant Anderson for extraordinary service behind enemy lines in the European theater 1943 to 1945. Behind enemy lines, Lisa struggled to reconcile the humble railway porter from the journal with this decorated war hero. More documents revealed the truth in fragments. Nathan had been recruited by the OSS because of his railway experience. Who better to sabotage Nazi supply lines than a man who understood trains inside and out? He'd parachuted into occupied France in 1943, spent 2 years helping the resistance destroy bridges, derail transports, and smuggle refugees to safety. There were photographs, Nathan in uniform standing with a group of French resistance fighters, Nathan receiving a medal from a general, Nathan beside a destroyed railway bridge, a satisfied smile on his dust-covered face. But it was the personal letters that completed the picture. "My dearest Mary," one began, dated June 1944. "I cannot tell you where I am or what I'm doing, but know that I think of you every night. The stars here are the same ones you see in Seattle, and that brings me comfort." Nathan had been married, something not mentioned in his journal about Alexander. The letters to Mary revealed a depth of feeling, a tenderness that contrasted sharply with the precision and discipline evident in his military records. "I've learned things in this war that change a man," he wrote in another letter. "When I come home, and I will come home, I want to live differently, simply, honestly. No more secrets, my love." But there had been more secrets. A letter dated March 1946, a year after the war ended, explained, "Mary, my beloved wife, you've been patient as that I've struggled to adjust to civilian life. The railway has taken me back, given me work. But something still troubles me. I made a promise to someone, a young man who trusted me with his life and his truth. I've told you about Alexander, about what I did to help him. What I haven't told you is that the skills I used, the forged documents, the hidden compartments, the escape routes, I learned them in France." Lisa found a smaller envelope marked, "Not to be opened until after my death, for my children." But there were no children. Nathan and Mary's names appeared on adoption applications and fostering certificates, but never a final placement. They'd tried for 20 years to have a family, biological or otherwise, but it had never happened. Beneath the wartime documents, Lisa discovered another layer of correspondence between Nathan and someone named George Kellerman, dated from the 1970s and 80s. The letters referenced the network and our continuing obligation. It took several letters before Lisa understood. Nathan hadn't been the only veteran using his skills to help people after the war. There was an entire underground railroad of former OSS and SOE operatives who helped people escape dangerous situations, abused women, political refugees, whistleblowers. "We learned in the war that official channels often fail," George wrote in one letter. "Sometimes survival requires invisibility. You saved that Preston boy using our methods. How many others have we saved between us? Hundreds. The war taught us to forge documents, create false identities, move people unseen. Peace taught us those skills still have purpose." Lisa found a ledger coded but decipherable with effort. Nathan had helped dozens of people over the years, using the train car as a way station. Names, dates, destinations. Some entries had notes: escaping violent husband, witness to police corruption, union organizer threatened by company. The train car hadn't just sheltered Alexander's secrets. It had been a sanctuary for desperate people for decades. A thump from the main car startled Lisa. Emma must have woken up. She quickly rewrapped the documents and replaced the floorboard, emerging from the secret room to find her daughter sitting up on her bench, bed eyes wide in the darkness. "Bad dream," Lisa sat beside Emma, smoothing her hair. Emma nodded, leaning into her mother. "The train was moving and I couldn't find you." Lisa held her close. "Well, we're not moving anywhere, and I'll always be right here." After Emma fell back asleep, Lisa returned to the hidden room, determined to understand the full scope of what she discovered. Nathan Anderson wasn't just a porter who had helped one desperate heir. He'd been a war hero who spent 40 years using his specialized skills to save anyone who needed saving. The train car wasn't just a hiding place, it was a station on a secret railroad run by veterans who couldn't stop rescuing people just because the war was over. Among the last documents, she found a list of contacts, other members of the network. Most entries were crossed out, marked deceased, with dates, but 3 remained unmarked: George Kellerman in Portland, Piker Ma Chen in San Francisco, Robert Webb in Vancouver. Phone numbers that might or might not still work. People who might or might not still be alive. Lisa stared at the numbers, weighing her options. These people might be able to confirm Nathan's military service, validate his credibility against any attempts by the Prestons to discredit him. But contacting them would pull her deeper into a world she barely understood, a world where powerful people buried inconvenient truths and where those who exposed them often paid a price. Her decision was made for her when her phone rang at dawn. Sarah Martinez, the reporter. "I've been looking into the Preston family based on what you texted. There's something odd. No one seems to have researched Alexander Preston's disappearance in decades. It's like the story's been buried." Lisa wasn't surprised. His father made sure of that, controlled the narrative. Alexander wasn't a whistleblower in their version, just a reckless heir who fell from a train. "Listen," Sarah's voice lowered. "In all the documents you found, was there anything about Nathan Anderson's background? Military service, special training?" Lisa's pulse quickened. "Why? Because the Preston family is already pushing back. They've hired investigators to discredit the story. They're claiming Nathan was a fantasist, that he made up the whole thing about Alexander for attention. They say a simple porter wouldn't have had the skills to forge documents or hide someone so effectively. Lisa clutched the phone tighter. He wasn't a simple porter. He was Office of Strategic Services Special Operations in Europe. I just found his military records last night. Silence on the other end. Then, Lisa, this changes everything. Can you send me photos? An hour later, after sending encrypted images of Nathan's military documents, Lisa made a decision. She picked up her phone and dialed the first number on the network list. It rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered. Hello, is this George Kellerman? A pause. Who's asking? My name is Lisa Morgan. I bought Nathan Anderson's train car. I found some documents about the network. The silence stretched so long, Lisa thought he'd hung up. Then Nathan is dead since 1987. I'm sorry. I thought you might have known. We lost touch in 85 when I moved. Tried to find him later, but a heavy sigh. You said you found documents, medals, letters, evidence of what you all did after the war, the people you helped. And what do you intend to do with this information? Miss Morgan Lisa thought about lying, about playing it safe. But these men had dealt in truth when it mattered. There's a journalist investigating the Preston family. Alexander's story is finally coming out. The family is trying to discredit Nathan. Say he was nobody, a liar. I want to prove them wrong. Another long pause. How soon can you get to Portland? The next morning, Lisa called in sick again. Carl was going to fire her soon if she kept this up. She drove Emma to school, then headed north to Portland, the carved wooden box of thank you letters on the seat beside her. Inside were messages from people Nathan had saved, testimony to a quiet heroism that deserved recognition. George Kellerman lived in a modest apartment overlooking the Willamette River. He was 93, sharp-eyed despite his age, moving carefully, but with the residual grace of a trained operative. His walls were covered with photographs, young men in uniform, resistance fighters, blurred images of blown bridges and derailed trains. So he said, after examining Nathan's documents, someone finally found the train car sanctuary. You knew about it? Of course. Nathan brought me there in 71 when I had a refugee family that needed hiding. Remarkable place, perfect for what we did. He studied Lisa. You live there now. With my daughter, we were desperate, about to be evicted. The car saved us, George smiled. Then it's still doing what Nathan intended. He always said that car was meant for the desperate. First Alexander, then so many others. Now you. He pulled out a photo album. Let me tell you about your predecessor, Miss Morgan. Let me tell you about the finest man I ever knew. For 3 hours, George talked about meeting Nathan in France when they were both behind enemy lines, about the Jewish children Nathan smuggled out in modified railway cars, hiding them in compartments he'd built himself. About the SS officer Nathan killed with his bare hands to protect a family of refugees. About how Nathan could forge any document, speak 4 languages, disappear into any crowd, despite being one of the few black operatives in the European theater. The army tried to keep him stateside at first, George said. Didn't think a Negro, that's what they called him, then could handle covert operations. Nathan proved them wrong the first week of training. Beat every white boy in hand-to-hand. Scored perfect on demolitions. Could plan a railway sabotage in his sleep. They had no choice but to send him. But after the war, he went back to being a porter. What else could he do? America wasn't ready for black war heroes, especially not ones trained in subversion and sabotage. But Nathan found a way to keep serving. Different uniforms, same mission, help the helpless, protect the vulnerable. George's eyes grew distant. We all did. Those of us who survived created our own network, our own underground railroad. No oversight, no bureaucracy, just veterans who couldn't forget what it felt like to save lives. He showed Lisa more photos. Mai Chen, one of the few Chinese-American agents who'd operated in Burma. Robert Webb, a Canadian who'd coordinated resistance activities across 3 countries. Others whose names were lost to time but whose faces showed the same determined compassion. The train car was special, though, George continued. Nathan made it the heart of our Pacific Northwest operations. Perfect cover, a railway porter's quarters, moving when needed, staying put when required. He must have hidden 50 people there, over the years, maybe more. I found the ledger, some entries, but it was coded. George laughed. Of course it was. Nathan loved his codes, learned them from a French cryptographer who was also a poet. Said secrets should be beautiful even when hidden. He grew serious. Miss Morgan, you need to understand something. What you found isn't just evidence about Alexander Preston or even about Nathan. You found proof of something larger, a network of people who refused to let their wartime skills atrophy in peace, who understood that fighting evil didn't end with Germany's surrender. Lisa pulled out the carved box of thank you letters. George's hands trembled as he read them. Tears rolled down his weathered cheeks. I know some of these names. That one, Patricia Hoffman, I helped Nathan get her and her children onto a freight train to Canada. Her husband had connections to organized crime, would have killed them all. This one, Robert Phan, Vietnamese interpreter, who exposed corruption in the refugee camps, had a price on his head. God, I'd forgotten how many there were. Mr. Kellerman, the Preston family, is trying to destroy Nathan's reputation. They're saying he was a nobody, a liar, someone trying to get attention. George's face hardened, and for a moment Lisa saw the warrior he had been. Are they now? Well, we'll see about that. He stood moving to a filing cabinet. I kept records too, different ones than Nathan, but overlapping, including some very interesting information about the Preston family's activities during the war. He pulled out a folder. Did you know Preston Industries had contracts with the War Department? They did transported materials, troops, supplies, but they also transported things that weren't on any manifest. Things for people who operated in shadows, who needed items moved without questions. Nathan wasn't the only one who noticed irregular shipments. We compared notes after the war. Lisa leaned forward. What kind of shipments? Art gold items that should have been in evidence lockers or returned to liberated countries? The Prestons weren't the only ones profiting from chaos, but they were among the best at it. Alexander must have found evidence of his father's wartime profiteering along with everything else. Would you be willing to go on record, talk to the journalist? George considered. I'm 93, Miss Morgan. What can they do to me? Kill me. I've been living on borrowed time since Normandy in '44. He smiled grimly. Give me the journalist's number. It's time some truth came out. Before Lisa left, George insisted on showing her something else. In a storage room in the building's basement covered by a tarp was an old steamer trunk. Inside were Nathan's operational materials, forged identity documents, currency from a dozen countries, radio components, and at the bottom, wrapped in silk, a Nazi officer's dagger. Nathan took this off an SS major who was about to execute a family of Hungarian Jews, George explained. Kept it as a reminder that evil wears uniforms, speaks softly, follows orders. He gave it to me before he died. Asked me to keep it safe. Now I'm giving it to you. I can't. You're the keeper of the train car now, the guardian of its secrets. These belong with you. He pressed a card into her hand. Mai Chen's number. She's 95, but still fierce. Robert passed in 2010, but his son knows the stories. Build your case, Miss Morgan. Show them who Nathan Anderson really was. The drive back to Cedar Falls took longer than usual. Lisa had to pull over twice, overwhelmed by the weight of what she'd learned. Nathan Anderson hadn't just saved Alexander Preston. He'd spent his entire life saving people using skills honed in humanity's darkest hour to bring light to individual desperate situations. When she got home, Emma was doing homework at the fold-out table they'd installed. How was your trip, Mom? Educational, baby? Very educational. That night, after Emma was asleep, Lisa made 2 more calls. Mai Chen answered on the first ring as if she'd been waiting decades for someone to ask about Nathan Anderson. Her voice was thin but steady as she corroborated everything George had said and added her own memories. Nathan recruited me for the network, she said. Found me working in a San Francisco laundry in 47 bitter about how they'd treated us during the war. He showed me how to use my anger productively, taught me forgery surveillance, how to move through the world unseen. We saved 17 women from trafficking rings together. Robert Webb's son Paul was equally forthcoming. Dad talked about Mr. Anderson all the time. Said he was the best operative he'd ever known, bar none. Kept a photo of him on his desk until the day he died. By the time Lisa hung up, she had pages of notes and a clear picture. Nathan Anderson had been a hero twice over, once in war saving Allied lives and crushing Nazi supply lines, and again in peace creating an underground railroad for the desperate. She sat in the secret room, surrounded by evidence of extraordinary lives lived in shadows. Tomorrow she'd connect Sarah Martinez with George Mai and Paul. The story would expand beyond the Preston corruption to encompass something greater, a network of veterans who'd refused to stop being heroes just because the war ended. The train car creaked gently around her, as if acknowledging its role in this long, strange history. How many desperate people had hidden in these walls? How many new lives had begun here? Lisa thought about her own desperation, the eviction notice that had led her to spend $500 on a rusted train car. She thought she was just trying to keep a roof over Emma's head. Instead, she'd stumbled into a legacy of courage that spanned decades. A knock on the main door made her jump. She quickly closed the secret room and went to answer it. Frank Morrison stood outside holding a flashlight. Saw your lights on. Wanted to make sure everything's okay with the plumbing. Lisa invited him in, grateful for the neighborly concern. Frank studied the main room, nodding approvingly at the transformation. Place looks good. Homey. Then his expression grew serious. Saw an expensive SUV driving slowly past earlier. Black tinted windows. Looked like it might have been the same one that Prescott guy drives. Probably nothing, but thought you should know. Lisa's blood ran cold. Did he stop? No, just drove by. Twice. Like he was checking something. Frank's eyes flicked to the secret room door. You planning to tell him what you found? Not him specifically, but the story's going public soon. Sarah Martinez is working on it. And I've connected with some of Nathan's old network people who can verify everything. Frank nodded slowly. Good. Documentation matters. His gaze lingered on the door. But those old boys knew a thing or two about security. Might be worth following their example. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. Motion sensor. Battery powered. I'll put it up where the drive meets the road. Give you some warning if anyone comes visiting when they shouldn't. After Frank left, Lisa double-checked all the windows and doors before trying to sleep. Was she being paranoid? Or was Frank right to be concerned? The Preston family had maintained their secrets for decades, had built an empire on buried truths. What would they do to keep those secrets from coming to light? Lisa woke before dawn, restless and anxious. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Emma, and made coffee in the small kitchen area. The train car was cold. The coal stove had burned down overnight, but she didn't bother rekindling it. Instead, she wrapped herself in a blanket and sat at the fold-out table watching the sky lighten through the windows. Her phone vibrated with a text from Sarah. Got your photos, working on the story. Preston family definitely nervous. They've hired Watson and Gary PR firm specialists in crisis management. How soon can you get me those military witnesses? Lisa texted back George's number along with a summary of what he could verify. Then she made a decision. She needed to protect the original documents. If the Prestons were already in crisis management mode, they might try to discredit or even destroy the evidence. She gathered the most important items, Nathan's journal, Alexander's financial records, the photographs linking Preston Sr. to illegal activities, and placed them in a waterproof container. She'd give it to Sarah for safekeeping when they met. Emma woke up excited about her first full day of living in the train car. Can we paint my side today? The blue color we picked. Lisa smiled, pushing aside her worries. Absolutely. Let's make this place ours. They spent the morning painting Emma's sleeping area a cheerful blue, then unpacking her books and arranging her small collection of treasures on the shelves Frank had built. For a few hours, Lisa was just a mother helping her daughter settle into a new home, not the keeper of dangerous secrets or the inheritor of a legacy of resistance. After lunch, Emma went outside to explore the woods around the property while Lisa organized the kitchen area. She was arranging dishes on the open shelves when she heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A vehicle approaching, moving slowly up the drive. Through the window, she saw the black SUV Frank had mentioned. It stopped about 50 feet from the train car, and James Prescott emerged dressed in another immaculate suit that seemed wildly out of place in the rural setting. He surveyed the property with obvious disdain before his gaze settled on the train car. Then he began walking toward it with determined strides. Lisa's heart hammered in her chest. She quickly closed the secret room door, making sure the latch caught. Then she stepped outside to meet Prescott before he could enter. Mr. Prescott, this is a surprise. Prescott didn't bother with pleasantries. Ms. Morgan, I'll be direct. There are rumors circulating that you found some historical documents in this. He gestured dismissively at the train car. This structure, documents that might pertain to the Preston family. Lisa kept her face neutral. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Prescott's smile didn't reach his eyes. Let me be clearer then. My client, Preston Enterprises, has learned that you're in contact with a reporter from the Seattle Chronicle regarding materials you allegedly discovered here. Materials that might cast certain historical figures in an unflattering light. And how would your client know who I'm in contact with? Prescott adjusted his tie. Seattle is a smaller city than people realize, especially in certain circles. Information travels. Now, regarding these supposed documents, my client is prepared to make you a generous offer for them. Historical memorabilia can be quite valuable to the right collector. Lisa crossed her arms. They're not for sale. Prescott's smile tightened. Everyone has a price, Miss Morgan. And forgive my bluntness, but yours can't be very high. He glanced pointedly at her worn jeans and the rusty train car behind her. $5,000, wisha, today, for whatever papers, journals, or photographs you may have found. I told you they're not for sale. Prescott's facade of civility slipped just a fraction. 10,000 then, final offer. And I should mention that my client is also prepared to pursue legal action if necessary. These documents, if they exist, might contain proprietary information or defamatory content. The litigation would be extensive. The threat hung in the air between them. Lisa thought of Emma, of the precarious life they were building, of how quickly it could all be destroyed by a prolonged legal battle, even one without merit. Then she thought of Nathan Anderson risking everything to help Alexander, of the veterans who'd created a network to protect the vulnerable because they understood that some fights don't end when the war does. Mr. Prescott, I don't have anything to sell you. And if I did, threatening me wouldn't be a very effective negotiating tactic. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to check on my daughter. Lisa turned to walk away, her heart pounding so hard she was sure Prescott could hear it. He called after her, his voice colder now. This isn't over, Ms. Morgan. My client protects its interests vigorously. I'd hate to see you and your daughter caught in the crossfire of a legal battle you can't possibly afford. Lisa kept walking without looking back. Only when she heard the SUV's engine start and the sound of tires on gravel fade did she allow herself to shake. Prescott's visit had confirmed what she already suspected: the Preston family knew about the documents and would do anything to keep them buried. She found Emma at the edge of the woods, constructing an elaborate fairy house from twigs and leaves. Mom, look at what I made. Lisa forced a smile, pushing down her fear. That's beautiful, baby. We should head back, though. It's getting cold. Inside the train car, Lisa texted Frank about Prescott's visit. The response came quickly. Not surprised. Guy like that always shows his true colors of bench run. Might want to stay with us tonight. Betty wouldn't mind. Lisa considered the offer but declined. Running away would only confirm to Prescott that she had something to hide. Better to stay put to show strength, even if she didn't feel it. She texted Sarah instead, updating her on the confrontation. Sarah's reply was immediate. Classic intimidation, don't engage. I'm meeting with my editor tomorrow. This story is happening. That night, after Emma was asleep, Lisa returned to the hidden room to continue organizing the documents. She needed to understand exactly what she had to prepare for the storm that was coming. In a box she hadn't fully explored, she found correspondence between Nathan and a Seattle bank, arranging for the safety deposit box mentioned in his journal box 447 at First National Bank of Seattle. According to the letters, the box had been paid for 50 years in advance. That would have expired in the mid-2000s, but it was possible the box still existed, might still contain whatever Alexander had left there. Another piece of the puzzle, another thread to pull. A sound from outside broke her concentration, a branch snapping perhaps, or an animal moving through the underbrush. Lisa froze, listening intently. Another sound, closer now. Footsteps on gravel, moving stealthily toward the train car. She quickly turned off her light, plunging the hidden room into darkness. Through the thin walls of the train car, she could hear someone circling, pausing occasionally as if looking for a way in. The main door was locked, but the windows were old and weak. If someone wanted to get in, they could. Lisa's phone was in the main room charging. The only weapon she had was Nathan's Nazi dagger, still wrapped in silk. She unwrapped it silently, the weight of it unfamiliar in her hand. She wasn't a soldier or a spy. She was a waitress, a single mother, a woman who'd been desperate enough to buy a rusted train car. But as Nathan had written in his journal, sometimes desperation is its own kind of strength. The footsteps stopped outside one of the windows. Lisa heard the soft scrape of metal on glass, someone trying to force the window open. She gripped the dagger tighter, positioning herself beside the hidden room's door. If whoever it was got in and found the secret room, they'd have to come through her. The window creaked as it was forced up. Lisa held her breath, listening to the sounds of someone climbing inside, trying to move quietly, but causing the old train car to shift slightly with their weight. Footsteps crossed the main room, hesitating by Emma's sleeping area. Lisa's blood ran cold at the thought of a stranger standing over her daughter. But Emma slept on, oblivious as the intruder continued moving through the car. The footsteps paused at the sofa where Lisa should have been sleeping. A flashlight clicked on its beam, visible in the crack under the door as it swept the main room. Then the light turned toward the hidden room door. Lisa raised the dagger, her heart thundering in her ears. The door handle turned slowly. The door began to open. Lisa prepared to strike, and then froze as the beam of light illuminated the intruder's face. Not Prescott or one of his men. A woman she'd never seen before, probably in her 60s, with silver hair and determined eyes. The woman's gaze moved from the dagger in Lisa's hand to her face, and remarkably, she smiled. "Well, at least you've got good instincts," Nathan would approve. "Who are you? How did you know about this room?" The woman lowered her flashlight but didn't turn it off. "My name is Patricia Hoffman Miller. My mother was Patricia Hoffman. Nathan Anderson helped her escape my father in 1968. He hid us in this train car for 3 days before getting us to Canada. I've been following the Preston story since it started to circulate in certain circles. Figured someone had finally found Nathan's sanctuary." Lisa lowered the dagger, still wary. "You broke into my home in the middle of the night." Patricia's expression softened. "I apologize for that, but after what happened to the last person who tried to expose the Prestons, I wasn't taking any chances. The last person, a journalist about 15 years ago, started asking questions about Alexander Preston's disappearance, about some financial irregularities from the 40s, had an accident before the story could run. Very convenient timing." Lisa felt sick. "Are you saying they killed him?" "I'm saying powerful families protect themselves. And the Prestons have had generations to perfect the art." She glanced at the open boxes of documents. "You need to be careful. These aren't just historical curiosities to them. They're existential threats. Why are you here?" Patricia moved further into the room, examining the photographs and papers with a sense of reverence. "To help. To repay a debt. Nathan saved my mother's life and mine by extension. When I heard someone had found his documents and was planning to expose the Preston family, I knew I had to get involved." She turned to Lisa, her expression grave. "The Prestons aren't just going to roll over. They'll destroy evidence, discredit witnesses, create counter-narratives. They've been managing their image for 80 years. But they have one weakness: they don't expect resistance. They're used to people backing down when threatened." A sound from the main car, Emma turning over in her sleep, reminded Lisa of the stakes. "I have a daughter." Patricia's eyes softened. "I know. I've been watching the train car for 2 days. Saw you painting together. She reminds me of myself at that age. After Nathan got us to Canada, my mother started over with nothing. But she always said freedom was worth any price." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small leather satchel. "My mother kept records, everything Nathan did to help us, the false papers he created, even a photograph taken inside this very room when we were hiding here. She made me promise to keep it secret until it was safe. When I saw the news stories start to circulate, I knew it was finally time." Lisa took the satchel, adding it to the growing collection of evidence. But something still bothered her. If the Prestons are as dangerous as you say, why expose them now? Why risk it? Patricia's gaze was steady. "Because the truth matters. Because what Nathan and the others did deserves to be remembered. And because some debts can only be repaid with courage." The two women talked for hours, comparing notes and forming a plan. Patricia had connections: a friend at the FBI, a retired judge who owed her a favor, a network of women who'd been helped by Nathan's Underground Railroad over the decades. Resources Lisa could never have accessed on her own. By the time Patricia left through the door, this time not the window, they had a strategy. The documents would be dispersed, copies made, and held by different people. Sarah's story would run simultaneously with formal requests for investigation from multiple government agencies. The Preston family would have too many fronts to fight at once. As dawn broke over the train car, Lisa felt a strange mix of terror and resolve. In trying to find a home for her daughter, she'd stumbled into a decades-old conspiracy. In trying to survive, She'd inherited a legacy of resistance. The path ahead was dangerous, but for the first time, she wasn't walking it alone. She slipped back into the main room and lay down on her sofa, finally allowing exhaustion to overtake her. Whatever came next, threats from Prescott, revelations about the Prestons, the upheaval of long-buried secrets, she would face it. Not just for Nathan and Alexander and all those who'd sought sanctuary in this forgotten train car, but for Emma, who deserved to grow up in a world where truth mattered more than power, where courage was rewarded rather than punished. As sleep claimed her, Lisa's last thought was of Nathan Anderson, the porter. The soldier, the hero standing beside his train car 80 years ago, not knowing the legacy he was creating, but choosing courage anyway. Sometimes she realized that's all any of us can do. 3 days after Patricia Hoffman Miller's midnight visit, Sarah Martinez's expose on the Preston family hit the front page of the Seattle Chronicle. The headline was simple but devastating. The porter's promise: how war hero exposed one of Seattle's darkest secrets. Beneath it ran a photograph of Nathan Anderson in his railway uniform, alongside his military portrait in OSS gear, 2 lives lived by one extraordinary man. Lisa read the article on her phone while Emma ate breakfast. Sarah had woven together Alexander's disappearance, Nathan's heroism, and the post-war network into a narrative that read like a thriller, but was backed by irrefutable documentation. Most damning were the financial records showing how Howard Preston had used Northern Pacific Railway cars to transport illegal goods across state lines during Prohibition, and the war years building a fortune on corruption that later generations laundered into respectability. The Preston family's attempts to discredit Nathan had backfired spectacularly once his OSS records were revealed. Testimonies from George Kellerman and Mai Chen, photographs of Nathan receiving the Bronze Star letters from people he'd saved over decades, it all painted a picture of quiet heroism that captivated readers. But it was the detail about Lisa and Emma living in the train car, about a desperate single mother finding shelter in the same space that had hidden refugees for decades, that made the story personal. The train car wasn't just a historical artifact, it was a continuing story of survival and sanctuary. By noon, Lisa's phone hadn't stopped ringing. Reporters from every major news outlet wanted interviews. She'd turned it off after the 20th call, but they'd already found their way to Cedar Falls. 3 news vans sat parked on the dirt road leading to the train car, their satellite dishes pointed skyward like mechanical flowers seeking the sun. "Mom, there are people with cameras outside," Emma said, peering through the curtain they had hung over one window. "They want to talk to us about our house." Lisa pulled her daughter away from the window. "I know, baby. Remember what we talked about. Today is going to be crazy, but it's important. We're helping tell a true story about brave people who lived a long time ago." She'd prepared Emma as best she could, explaining that their home had a special history, that people would be interested in it for a while. Emma had taken it in stride, excited by the idea that their train car was famous. 8-year-olds, Lisa had discovered, could adapt to almost anything if you framed it as an adventure. Frank Morrison had appointed himself unofficial security, parking his truck across the access road, and politely but firmly turning away anyone who tried to approach without permission. His wife, Betty, brought sandwiches and stood guard with Emma while Lisa gave her first interview to Sarah Martinez, this time with cameras rolling. "I never expected any of this," Lisa said, sitting on the steps of the train car. "I just needed a place to live that I could afford." Finding those documents, learning about Nathan and Alexander and everyone else who passed through here, it's been overwhelming but also inspiring. These were ordinary people who did extraordinary things when it mattered. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "The Preston family has issued a statement saying they had no knowledge of their ancestors' activities. There's talk of congressional hearings, investigations into wartime profiteering. That's for other people to sort out," Lisa said. "I'm just focused on preserving this place and these stories. This train car has been a sanctuary for the desperate for 90 years. I want to make sure it continues to be that in whatever form makes sense." The interview aired that night on the national news. Within hours, Lisa's inbox was flooded with messages. Most were supportive people sharing their own family stories of hidden heroes or expressing admiration for Nathan Anderson's courage. But there were also offers, museums wanting to buy the train car, filmmakers interested in the rights to the story, publishers suggesting book deals. One email stood out from the rest. It was from Elizabeth Collins, now 98 years old, living in a care facility in Portland. Lisa's hands shook as she read, My name was Elizabeth Collins when I knew Alexander Preston. We were engaged to be married when he disappeared. His family told me he fell from the train while drunk. I never believed it, but I had no proof. I mourned him, eventually married another man, raised a family, but I never forgot my first love. When I saw your story, when I learned he survived, that he built a new life as Alexander Jensen, I wept for hours, not from sadness, but from joy. He lived. He escaped. He found peace. Thank you for bringing me that gift. I have something that belongs with the train car. Alexander gave me a locket the night before he left Chicago. Inside is a photo of us and a tiny key. I never knew what the key opened. Now I think I do. May I visit? Lisa wrote back immediately, inviting Elizabeth to come whenever she felt able. That night, unable to sleep with the weight of the day's revelations, she sat in Nathan's secret room reading through more of the documents. Among Alexander's papers, she found a reference to a locket, to a safety measure he'd arranged in case something went wrong. The next morning brought unexpected visitors, a delegation from the National Railway Historical Society, led by Dr. Patricia Holloway, a preservation specialist who'd written 3 books on railway history. Ms. Morgan, Dr. Holloway said, standing before the train car with obvious reverence, "What you have here is beyond significant. This isn't just a piece of railway history. It's a testament to American courage, to the underground networks that have always existed to help the vulnerable. We'd like to help you preserve it." "I can't afford professional preservation," Lisa said honestly. "I could barely afford the $500 to buy it." Dr. Holloway smiled. "That's why we're here. The Society has emergency funds for situations exactly like this. Moreover, I suspect once the public understands what this place represents, funding won't be a problem." She was right. By the end of the week, a GoFundMe page set up by someone in Cedar Falls had raised over $200,000. Messages poured in with donations. "My grandmother escaped an abusive marriage in the 50s. I don't know if Nathan helped her, but someone did. This is for all the secret heroes. My family fled Hungary in '44. People like Nathan saved us. Preserving this history matters." The transformation began slowly. Dr. Holloway brought in experts who carefully documented every inch of the train car before any restoration work began. They found more secrets, a hidden compartment in the roof containing forged documents from various decades, another beneath the kitchen area, with emergency supplies that had been refreshed regularly until Nathan's death. Meanwhile, the human stories kept emerging. An elderly woman from Seattle came forward with photos of her mother, who'd hidden in the train car in 1958 while escaping a cult. A Vietnamese family shared letters describing how Nathan had helped their grandfather defect with crucial intelligence in 1972. Each story added another layer to the train car's history. Elizabeth Collins arrived on a cold December morning, accompanied by her grandson. She was frail but sharp, her eyes still bright with intelligence. Lisa helped her up the steps into the train car, watching as the elderly woman's face transformed with memory. "It looks different," Elizabeth said softly, "but the bones are the same. Alexander drew me pictures of it, you know. Said one day we'd take a trip together, just riding the rails to nowhere in particular." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. "This is what I came to bring." The locket was gold engraved with intertwining initials, AP and EC. Inside, along with a faded photo of a young couple, radiant with hope, was indeed a tiny key. "Alexander was always cautious," Elizabeth explained. "Said if something happened, if he couldn't come back, this key would matter someday. I kept it for 75 years, never knowing what it opened." Lisa studied the key. It was smaller than any lock she'd seen in the train car, more like a safety deposit box key, but with unusual teeth. She brought Elizabeth to the secret room, now carefully cataloged and preserved, and they searched together. It was Emma who found it, because of course it was. While the adults examined obvious places she'd been drawn to Alexander's sketches on the wall. "Mom, this drawing has a funny frame," she said, pointing to a sketch of the train car that had been mounted more carefully than the others. Behind the frame set into the wall was a tiny keyhole, nearly invisible unless you knew to look. Elizabeth's key fit perfectly. The small door that opened revealed a cavity no bigger than a shoebox, but what it contained changed everything. Stock certificates, not for Preston Industries, but for dozens of small companies. A note in Alexander's handwriting explained, "I converted what I could of my trust fund before leaving. Invested in companies I believed would help build a better America. If something happens to me, these belong to Elizabeth. If she cannot be found, they belong to whoever keeps the sanctuary. Dr. Holloway, who'd been documenting everything, gasped when she saw the company names. These are, my God, some of these became Fortune 500 companies. IBM, Boeing, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. That's 3M now. Even accounting for splits and changes, these certificates could be worth millions. Millions, Elizabeth finished quietly. He always was clever with investments. Said it was the one useful thing his father taught him. She looked at Lisa. These belong to you now, to the sanctuary. Lisa shook her head. They're yours. He left them for you. No, Elizabeth said firmly, I have enough. My late husband was a good provider, and I want for nothing. Alexander would want this used for the sanctuary, I'm certain of it. She smiled. Consider it my donation to the museum fund. The authentication and conversion of the stock certificates took months, but when complete, the trust established for the train car's preservation contained nearly $15 million. The media went wild with this new twist. The sanctuary that had sheltered the desperate now had the funds to continue that mission indefinitely. With proper funding secured, the transformation accelerated. The train car was carefully lifted onto a new foundation that would preserve it while allowing for climate control and proper maintenance. A small museum building was constructed adjacent to it, designed to tell the stories of everyone who'd found refuge in the car across 9 decades. Lisa found herself working closely with Dr. Holloway and a team of historians to ensure the museum honored all aspects of the train car's history. They created exhibits on railway heritage, on Nathan's wartime service, on the post-war network of veterans, on each person whose story had emerged from the shadows. But Lisa insisted on one crucial element. The museum wouldn't just be about the past. A portion of the funding would support a continuing sanctuary program, helping people in desperate situations just as Nathan had done. They partnered with domestic violence shelters, refugee organizations, and veterans groups to provide emergency assistance and safe passage for those who needed it. The train car can't physically shelter people anymore, Lisa explained to the board they'd assembled, but its spirit can. Nathan Anderson didn't stop helping people just because the war ended. Neither should we. Emma, now 9, had become the unofficial ambassador of the project. She gave tours to visiting school groups, her natural enthusiasm making history come alive for other children. This is where my mom and I lived when we had nowhere else to go, she'd say proudly. And this is where heroes hid when they were saving people. And this is where Mr. Nathan kept his secrets to protect everyone. Cool, right? The grand opening was set for May 15th, exactly 1 year after Lisa had discovered the locked room. The transformation of the site was remarkable. The train car, now restored to its 1940s glory, while preserving all the hidden compartments and modifications, stood as the centerpiece. The museum building housed the archives and exhibits. A meditation garden honored those who'd passed through the sanctuary. The opening ceremony drew hundreds. George Kellerman, now 94, cut the ribbon with hands that trembled, not from age but from emotion. Mai Chen, despite her 96 years, had insisted on flying in from San Francisco. Elizabeth Collins sat in the front row wearing the locket that had kept a secret for so long. This place, George said in his speech, represents the best of what we can be. Not the wars we fight, but the peace we wage. Not the official history, but the secret kindness that really shapes the world. Nathan Anderson was my brother in arms and my brother in peace. I'm honored to see his legacy preserved and continued. The media coverage was extensive, but had shifted from sensationalism to genuine appreciation for the historical significance. The Preston family, facing multiple investigations and lawsuits, had quietly settled out of court, establishing their own fund for historical preservation, a transparent attempt at rehabilitation that fooled no one but at least provided resources for other museums. But for Lisa, the most meaningful moment came after the ceremonies, when the crowds had gone home. She stood in the restored train car with Emma, just the two of them in the space that had saved them. "Are you sad we can't live here anymore?" Emma asked. They had moved into a small house in town 6 months earlier, once the restoration work made living in the train car impossible. Sometimes, Lisa admitted, "But look what it's become, baby. Look how many people will learn these stories now. Look how many more people will get help because of what we found." Mr. Nathan would be happy, Emma said, with the certainty only children possess. And Mr. Alexander and all the others. They wanted to help people, and now they still are. The first year of the museum's operation exceeded all expectations. School groups came from across the state. Historians arrived to study the archives. Veterans organizations held ceremonies. Most meaningfully, the Sanctuary Fund helped relocate 15 families fleeing dangerous situations, provided emergency assistance to dozens more, and established a scholarship program for children of refugees and abuse survivors. Lisa had quit her job at the diner. The museum board had insisted on hiring her as executive director, arguing that no one understood the spirit of the place better. It felt surreal going from minimum wage to a salary that actually covered her bills with money left over. But she'd earned it through her careful stewardship of the stories and artifacts, her insistence on honoring everyone who'd been touched by the train car's sanctuary. One rainy afternoon in November, a year and a half after everything began, Lisa was working in the archive room when Emma burst in. "Mom, there's a man here who says he has something for the museum. He says his grandfather rode in our train car." Lisa followed Emma to find a middle-aged man standing in the museum lobby holding a battered leather briefcase. "My name is Michael Reeves," the man said. "My grandfather was Robert Phan, Vietnamese interpreter who exposed corruption in the refugee camps in '72. Nathan Anderson helped him get to Canada." The name clicked immediately. Lisa had seen it in Nathan's ledger. "Grandpa left me this briefcase when he died." Michael continued, said it contained proof of what he went through and who helped him. "I never opened it. Didn't feel right. But when I saw your museum on the news, I knew this is where it belongs." Inside the briefcase were documents that added yet another chapter to the train car's history. Robert Phan's original refugee identification cards, photographs taken inside the train car, during his 3-day stay, letters from Nathan arranging his safe passage, and most valuably a journal Robert had kept describing the entire experience. He wrote about Nathan's kindness, his attention to detail, the way he'd created an entire new identity for Robert, complete with backstory and documentation. "The American government abandoned many of us who helped them," Robert wrote, "but this one American, this porter, honored the promise his country had broken. He restored my faith in humanity at a time when I had none left." Michael's voice cracked as he shared his grandfather's story. "For years, I thought these were just old man's tales. A secret agent railway porter, hidden compartments, and underground networks. It seemed like something from a spy novel. But it was all true. My grandfather wouldn't be alive to have children. I wouldn't exist if not for what happened in this train car." Stories like Michael's continued to emerge. The museum's archive grew weekly as families came forward with letters, photos, memories. Each edition reinforced the truth that Nathan Anderson and his network had saved more lives than anyone had imagined. 3 years after the museum's opening, it won the National Trust for Historic Preservation Award. Lisa stood on a stage in Washington, D.C., accepting the honor on behalf of everyone who'd been part of the train car's story. In the audience sat Emma, now 11, and poised beyond her years, wearing a dress they'd bought specially for the occasion. "This award," Lisa said in her speech, "belongs to the brave people who risked everything to help others. To Nathan Anderson, who turned wartime skills into peacetime salvation. To Alexander Preston, who chose truth over comfort. To all the unnamed heroes who've always existed in the shadows, helping the desperate find hope. But it also belongs to my daughter and me, because we're proof that the need for sanctuary never ends." 3.5 years ago, we were facing eviction with nowhere to go. A $500 train car saved us not just by giving us shelter, but by connecting us to a legacy of courage we didn't know existed. That train car taught me that desperation isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something that connects us across time. The desperate of the 1940s and the desperate of today share the same need for someone to see them, to help them, to offer them sanctuary. Nathan Anderson understood that. The museum we've built continues that understanding. After the ceremony at the reception, a young man approached Lisa. He was nervous, fidgeting with his tie, clearly out of place among the preservation professionals and donors. "Ms. Morgan, my name is Marcus. I heard your speech. The part about sanctuary. I'm being evicted next month. Lost my job. Can't catch up on rent. I've got 2 kids. I didn't know where else to turn." Lisa didn't hesitate. She pulled out her phone and called the Sanctuary Fund coordinator. Within an hour, they'd arranged temporary housing assistance and connected Marcus with job placement services. It wasn't as dramatic as hiding someone in a train car, but it was the same spirit, one desperate person helping another. "Thank you," Marcus said, tears in his eyes. "I didn't believe places like this really existed anymore." They've always existed, Lisa told him. Sometimes in train cars, sometimes in museums, sometimes just in people willing to help. That's what the sanctuary taught me. There's always been an underground railroad for the desperate. We just have to be willing to see it. The flight back to Seattle gave Lisa time to reflect on the journey from that morning when she'd peeled an eviction notice off her door to standing on a stage accepting a national award. It felt like someone else's life, but it wasn't. It was hers, shaped by desperation into something larger than a survival. Emma slept beside her on the plane, clutching the program from the ceremony. Inside, she'd collected autographs from everyone she'd met, turning a formal document into a personal memory. That was Emma's gift, making the monumental, human-sized, approachable real. Back in Cedar Falls, they drove past the museum on their way to their house. It was closed for the evening, but the lights illuminating the train car made it glow against the darkness. 3 years of careful work had transformed it from a rusted relic into a beacon. School groups came weekly. Researchers used the archives. The Sanctuary Fund had helped over 100 families find safety and stability. But more than that, it had become what Alexander Preston had sketched all those years ago, a place where beauty lived beside truth, where the desperate found hope. His drawing of a woman and child beside a train car looking toward a bright horizon was now framed in the museum's main gallery with a simple caption, "Vision realized 1942 to present." That night, after Emma was asleep, Lisa sat in her small home office, a luxury she still couldn't quite believe, working on the book she'd finally agreed to write. Not about herself, though. Her story was part of it, but about the legacy of Sanctuary, about all the Nathan Andersons and secret networks that had always existed, about the Alexanders who chose truth over comfort, about the desperate who became heroes simply by helping the next desperate soul. Her phone buzzed with an email from Dr. Holloway. Another family had come forward with a story, this one from the 1980s. A woman who'd escaped a cult with Nathan's help, now a successful therapist specializing in cult recovery. She wanted to establish a program at the museum for others like her. Lisa smiled. The sanctuary kept expanding, reaching forward and backward in time, connecting people across decades through shared experiences of desperation and hope. The train car might be a museum now, but its true purpose remained unchanged, sheltering those who needed it in whatever form that took. Looking out her window, she could see the lights of the museum in the distance. Sometimes late at night, she imagined she could hear the train car settling on its new foundation, creaking with memories and possibilities. It had carried railway workers across the frontier, hidden a desperate heir, sheltered refugees and abuse victims, housed a single mother and her daughter. Now it carried all their stories forward, a moving sanctuary that had finally found its permanent home. The transformation was complete, but the story continued. Every new visitor to the museum, every family helped by the Sanctuary Fund, every child who heard Emma's enthusiastic tours added another chapter. The train car had become what it was always meant to be, not just a preservation of the past, but a living promise that Sanctuary endures, that the desperate will always find helpers, and that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose compassion over comfort. Lisa saved her work and closed her laptop. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new stories, and new people needing help. But tonight she was simply grateful. Grateful for a $500 miracle that had changed her life. Grateful for the heroes who'd come before. Grateful for the chance to be part of something larger than survival. In her bedroom, she kept one artifact from their time in the train car, the key Nathan had hidden under the floorboards, the one that had started everything. It sat on her dresser, catching the moonlight, a reminder that some doors once opened can never be closed, and that sometimes the most desperate decisions lead to the most extraordinary destinations. 5 years later, on a crisp autumn morning, Lisa stood before a gathering that would have seemed impossible when she first saw that classified ad for a $500 train car. The Secretary of the Interior was there along with senators, historians, and descendants of dozens of people Nathan Anderson had saved. They were dedicating the Anderson-Preston Sanctuary National Historic Site, the first of its kind, to honor not a battle or a building, but an ongoing tradition of providing refuge. Emma, now 13 and confident beyond her years, introduced the speakers. She'd written her introduction herself, weaving together the threads of all the stories the sanctuary had collected. When she spoke about their own journey from desperation to purpose, her voice never wavered. "My mom bought a train car because we were about to be homeless," Emma said simply. "We thought we were just trying to survive. Instead, we found out that survival creates its own kind of heroism. That helping the next desperate person isn't charity, it's honoring everyone who helped us. The crowd applauded, but Emma wasn't finished. The Sanctuary Fund has now helped 843 families. That's 843 stories like ours. 843 chances for desperation to transform into hope. And we're just getting started. After the ceremony, Lisa walked through the expanded museum. The train car remained the centerpiece, but now it was surrounded by additional exhibits, educational spaces, and a resource center that connected people in crisis with immediate help. The walls displayed photos of all the known people who'd found refuge in the train car: Alexander Preston, Patricia Hoffman, Vietnamese refugees, abuse survivors, and at the end, Lisa and Emma Morgan. She paused at a new addition, a letter that had arrived just the week before from an elderly man in France. His grandfather had been one of the resistance fighters Nathan worked with during the war. He'd found Nathan's name in old family papers and searched until he found the museum. My grandfather spoke of the American porter until his death. The letter read, said he was the bravest man he'd ever known, not because he wasn't afraid, but because he helped others despite his fear. Thank you for keeping his memory alive. As the sun set over the museum grounds, casting long shadows from the train car across the meditation garden, Lisa thought about the strange mathematics of desperation and hope. One $500 purchase had uncovered $15 million in hidden stock certificates. One locked door had revealed 90 years of secrets. One desperate mother's last-ditch effort to find shelter had created a sanctuary that would last generations. The train car sat on its rails, going nowhere and everywhere at once. Inside its restored walls, the whispers of the desperate echoed forward Alexander's fear, Nathan's determination, the relief of hundreds who'd found safety, Lisa's own desperation that morning she'd seen the ad. All of them part of the same story, the same truth that in our darkest moments, we are capable of creating the most light. Tomorrow, the museum would open as usual. Tour groups would come through. The Sanctuary Fund Committee would review new applications. Someone somewhere would be desperate enough to reach out for help and find it waiting. The Underground Railroad that Nathan Anderson had operated in secret now ran in daylight, official and funded and proud. But tonight, as the last visitors left and the lights dimmed to their evening settings, the train car rested in peaceful purpose. It had sheltered the desperate. It had preserved the truth. It had transformed survival into sanctuary, and it would keep doing so as long as there were people who needed help and people brave enough to provide it. Lisa Morgan, executive director of a National Historic Site winner of Preservation Awards, author of a best-selling book, stood where she'd once stood as a desperate mother with nowhere to go. The distance between those two women could be measured in years and achievements, but the connection between them was unbreakable, forged in a moment of desperation that became an act of grace. In a $500 purchase that bought not just shelter, but purpose. And a locked door that opened to reveal that the most ordinary people are capable of the most extraordinary love. The train car had saved them. Now they would ensure it saved others forever. The Sanctuary Express would keep rolling, picking up the desperate and delivering them to hope one soul at a time. That's the thing about trains, even sitting still, they're always ready for the next journey. And there's always a next journey.